And you can start.
All right, welcome everyone to this week's Brown Bag with the Colorado Green Building Guild. I'm Frank, I'm the current president of the Guild. Today we are joined with two great presenters. We're going to be learning about community solar. We got Julie and Melly. But first, I'm just going to give you a quick update about CGBG, and then we can get rolling. So just want to say thank you to our sponsors. Couldn't do this without them. They help us produce all this quality content that we've been giving you. Alpin, City of Boulder, 475, Hammerwell, Cottonwood, and Boulder County. Every membership, every sponsorship counts, but really appreciate these ones for, forking up the big bucks. Just a quick update about what we've been up to. You can go to our YouTube channel, follow us there. We'll be recording all these presentations as well as there are past presentations up on both the YouTube channel and our website. You can find them there, cgbg.org. You can also find recordings of How I Green Built This. We usually host one of those about once a month as well. Interviews with local people talking about the state of the industry and what they're up to and different challenges they've held. And we're also going to try to continue to host happy hours. And this allows us to hopefully network a little bit more, get to know each other a little bit better. We have a really fun platform for that allows you to kind of have your little separate side conversations and all that kind of stuff. So it's a good time. Please join us for those. And hopefully we can continue to strengthen our community even in the times when we can't be together in person. Also on the website, you can find our events page, kind of tells you about everything that's coming up. If you have something that you want to add to the events calendar as well, let us know. There's always lots going on. So check it out, keep it updated, add it to your calendar. Hopefully we'll see you all at these cool events coming up. And the next How I Green Built This, Wednesday, April 7th, Jason Markel and Justin Blaze, they're going to be kind of giving us the state of the industry from their eyes. Larger contractors, should be interesting conversation. And I'm looking forward to it. We should learn a lot, especially because I'm more in the small residential side. So looking forward to that one. If you aren't currently following us, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, get on the subscription list for our newsletter. Please do. You'll be able to find all the latest content, get the updates, all that kind of stuff. And then just generally, as you're perusing all this, you're going to our website, you're coming to these events. If you're not a member, consider joining. We're going to be releasing a new membership platform real soon. So yeah, think about joining. If you join sooner and you want to change over based on the new membership thing, I'm sure we can figure that out. No big deal. But yeah, check it out. We're happy to continue to bring quality content and hopefully continue to strengthen our community, elevate the building and design industry in Colorado. So hopefully you can be a part of that. All right, so I probably should have gone a little slower, but here we are. So I am going to kick it over to Julie and Melly. SunShare, they're going to talk to us about community solar, and that's it for me. Good to see you all. Thanks for attending.
All right, am I live now? Up the mic.
Live.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks everybody. Yeah, I wanted to thank the Green Building Guild for having us. I really appreciate this opportunity to talk to you all and educate you about community solar. So for me, my background is in engineering, civil and environmental engineering. But around the turn of the century, I decided I was interested in solar. And so my first job in solar was working for Guyam Real Goods. I was a phone tech selling their equipment, selling little off-grid PV systems to folks that wanted to get a PV system for their cabin. After that, I moved to Namaste Solar in 2006, right after net metering started in our state. And so we're a small company then. And I worked for 5 years designing and selling residential systems, rooftop systems. Did a little bit of project management as well for commercial systems. In 2014 into 2015, I was the admin for the Colorado Green Building Guild. So hi again, it's good to be back. More recently, I worked for Namaste again, doing CAD work for new home construction with PV on it, residential PV. And now I am tickled pink to be working for SunShare, educating folks on community solar and signing them up for subscriptions. So I have to just admit I'm a little nervous. It's been a long time since I've done any kind of public speaking, so please bear with me if I trip over my words a little bit. But I'll get back on it. So what the heck is community solar? So we're going to talk about it in detail eventually, but right now I just want to give a brief overview of the idea. So we build large arrays out on, often on farmland. Our last one was 5 megawatts, just went live in February, and the next one we're building is almost that big, also in Weld County on farmland that should go live this summer. So what we do is a subscriber is paying us to push green energy onto Xcel's grid, and then Xcel pays that customer in the form of a credit off their Xcel bill, and they pay us. So it's a big happy renewable triangle. And that is it in a nutshell how community solar works. So next we are going to talk about the history of community solar and SunShare in particular. We're going to talk about legislation and policy in Colorado, past, present, and future, and what you can do to help us further the cause and strengthen legislation in our state. I'm no expert on that, but fortunately, Melly is. And so I am very grateful that she's been able to make the time to come here today and talk to us. She's been with SunShare for 5 years. She is the Executive Vice President of Marketing and Operations. So I would like to pass it off to Melina Fleming.
Well, thank you. Yeah, thank you guys so much for having us. We're thrilled to be talking to you. We're always excited to talk to any group that is supporting green energy. That is what we're here for. So I'll give you just a little bit of background on SunShare, and kind of the history of community solar legislation. And then, as Julie said, I can go into a little bit of detail about, kind of what's going on right now and what you can do today to participate. So Colorado was actually the first state in the nation to pass community solar legislation in 2010. And SunShare was the first company to build a community solar garden through an open market program. So our founder, David Amster, was actually in college when the first legislation passed. He had just started an internship and had just graduated or was graduating when that legislation passed, and kind of saw the writing on the wall that this was the future, right, of energy, and that this was something that brought access to people who had no way previously of accessing renewable energy or solar specifically. So he founded SunShare in 2011. The first projects that we built were actually with Colorado Springs utilities, with Good Shepherd Church and Venatucci, which was a community farm. And, the kind of David's, I think, vision behind this is different from a lot of other renewable or community solar companies' visions, wherein he specifically honed in on the fact that approximately 75% of homes cannot have rooftop solar on them for a variety of reasons, like whether that's rooftop shading or the type of roof, or the person doesn't own their home, or simply, you know, the large capital outlay that is often required. That, you know, so that means that 75% of households cannot actually participate in solar in any way other than community solar. So his whole idea was to bring that access to solar energy to everyone, and focusing on residents, which a lot of community solar companies, you know, they seek out kind of the large commercial, they call them anchor customers. And it wasn't until really so SunShare built the very first 100% residential community solar garden in 2017 in Minnesota. So 7 years after that legislation had passed, legislation that was specifically designed to bring access to residents who could not, you know, participate in solar any other way. That was the first time that 100% residential garden was built. So that was the, you know, kind of the genesis of SunShare's beginning, and like the pinnacle of actually achieving what we had set out to do. And since then, we've continued on. You know, we've acquired more than like 13,000 residential customers. You know, this is something that it is part of our DNA, that the residential subscriber makes us who we are. So that's kind of the beginning of SunShare. In terms of the legislation, so as I said, Colorado was the very first state to pass community solar legislation. It was, you know, rickety, if you will. You know, we don't always know what the benefits are, what the risks are, how are customers you know, how is the end user going to benefit from this? What are all of the good things that are going to happen when that legislation passes? So the program was structured really as a pilot to, you know, kind of try to figure out a way, how can we allow independent companies to produce energy in a state that has, you know, essentially a monopoly on utilities. So Xcel Energy is your only utility option. So there are a lot of rules around, you know, who is allowed to produce energy. And community solar is one of the very few ways where that is possible. It's possible for an independent company to produce new energy in a regulated state like Colorado. So we then SunShare helped pass legislation in 2014 in Minnesota and, you know, we kind of built on what we had learned from that Colorado legislation, that, you know, we did see that people were focusing on getting large, you know, kind of municipal subscribers, and that the original intent of the legislation, which had been to serve residential, low-income, and agricultural users, was not necessarily being fulfilled with the way that that program was set up. So we were able to design a program in Minnesota or help design, of course we didn't do it all ourselves, but design legislation in Minnesota that was like far more beneficial to residents and to companies who were seeking out residential subscribers. That said, we still then were the very first, and for like 3 years after that, the only company that had built a 100% residential garden in Minnesota. So then in 2019, we were kind of looking at, you know, we had built at that point around 75 megawatts in Minnesota, and we had, you know, not built that much more capacity in our own home state of Colorado. And, you know, we were looking at the whys and trying to figure out, you know, how can we expand this program in Colorado? We were the first program, but we're not necessarily the best program. So in 2019, our legislative lead, her name is Karina Kumpy. She's our general counsel. She's now also our COO. But she worked with a team of legislators to pass what's called the Community Solar Gardens Modernization Act, the shortest bill name of any bill ever. And that really made the changes to the Colorado legislation that allowed us to start building more community solar gardens in Colorado. So it expanded the size from a maximum of 2 megawatts to a maximum of 5 megawatts, which will actually increase to a maximum of 10 megawatts in 2023, which means that we can get economies of scale when we're building, so that we can not only serve more subscribers, but that we can serve them at a better rate than we would be able to otherwise, because our costs are able to be lower, just because of economies of scale. It also eliminated a county adjacency requirement. So Julie mentioned that the two, the garden that we brought online earlier this year, and one of the ones we have planned for later this year, are both in Weld County. Well, until this law was passed, subscribers to those gardens had to live in the same county or a county adjacent to where that garden was located. And what that meant was that oftentimes, when we talk about the benefit of building a solar garden on farmland, where we're then able to, utilize that land in a way that it hasn't been able to be used in the past, the places where there are farmland are not necessarily the places where there are people. So there was sort of a constant battle of how do we keep our costs down, put our solar gardens in a place that is beneficial to, the landowner where we're building the garden, but also have have a pool of subscribers available to us who live in an adjacent county. So that was eliminated, that rule that you had to be in a county adjacent. And so that opened up literally any Excel customer in Colorado now can subscribe to any garden. So we are able to find the most efficient and most beneficial spot to build the garden, and then also find the subscribers who want to participate, whether they're in rural areas or urban areas. It does not matter. They're able to participate if they want to. So that was kind of the big opportunity in 2019. At that point, the Public Utilities Commission also expanded the program. So this is all conducted through an RFP that Excel offers. Essentially, all of the different community solar developers have to bid in to say, this is how much capacity we want to build. This is, the number of subscribers we think it will support. This is the type of subscriber we think it will support. And that had been limited to about 30 megawatts a year previously. And now it has been doubled essentially. So since 2019, like the 2020 plan was for around 70 megawatts. And 1 megawatt serves around like 400 or 275 customers, like residential customers. So, you're talking about 2,700 customers that can be served in those 10 megawatt gardens that will be coming online in 2023, which is just a monumental change to, the effectiveness, I would say, of the program, in addition to the opportunity that subscribers have. So that's the big piece, like sort of large, high level for Colorado. Right now, what we're working on, and we're working both through legislative avenues and then also with the PUC, the Public Utilities Commission, we're working on ensuring that the subscriber bill credits are, so that Julie mentioned, kind of you pay SunShare to produce your energy, and then Excel pays you back for that energy in the form of bill credits on your utility bill. So what we're trying to do is align those bill credits to the retail rate of electricity to guarantee or give some assurance to our subscribers for the lifetime of the garden of what that payment structure is going to look like forever. Because right now there's some risk involved. We don't know what the bill credit is going to be in the future. We only have, kind of analysis based on what has happened in the past. So we're working to kind of structure that in a different way so that it's more predictable for the subscriber. So that's kind of what we're working on now. And then specific to Boulder, we've had many talks with the city and county of Boulder about, kind of the opportunities of allowing community solar to count toward, the renewable energy requirements, specifically in, kind of the planning environment. So we've had, people call us who are building a gas fire pit and have to offset that, usage with renewable energy, or, you just bought an electric vehicle and therefore your electricity usage is increasing and you want to, increase your renewable energy offset. So right now, through the planning department, community solar subscriptions do not, unfortunately, count toward those required offsets. And that is because our subscriptions are with a person and not with the home itself. And our subscriptions have the ability to cancel them. And so they can't just, sort of be required to stay with the home. So this is something that, we've kind of been in talks. We were in talks last year pre-COVID, and they kind of slowed down. So we're going to be kind of ramping those back up to, to really try to figure out a way to say that, yes, the fact that we are generating additional solar electricity that is being added to the energy grid, should count toward those requirements. So that's something we talked with Jessica earlier about doing a blog for CGBG, and we can put some details in there about, kind of ways that you can help, messages that you can deliver, things that we can kind of help us, help the world to, kind of make some of these changes that are not super dramatic, but that could have a big impact on, how people participate, whether they are encouraged to participate, and, can, again, just expand community solar, because every new person who participates is one more testimonial about why this is important and why, the PUC and Excel and the state should be encouraging this type of growth. So I think that's what I have to cover. I'm going to hand it back to Julie, who's going to talk about, I think, the specific pros and cons of rooftop versus community solar. And then I will be around at the end for any questions that you guys have.
Awesome. Thank you, Melly. That was great. Appreciate it. So, I'm going to move now into compare and contrast pros and cons of rooftop solar versus community solar. So there's several perspectives you can look at it from. So let's start with the environment. Is there one of them that's better for the environment than other? And I would say that their environmental benefit is equal. Each of them is producing new green energy and putting it onto the grid and offsetting the amount of fossil fuel energy that home would otherwise need to pull from the grid. So that much less fossil fuel energy needs to be produced. And that's assuming that PV system is producing 100% of the house's needs, or that house is subscribing for 100% of their needs to a solar garden. So on those, I would say equal. Providing alternatives to consumers. Both of these are putting homegrown green energy onto the grid outside of Excel's house. And I think we all agree that's a good thing. Say no more there. What I would mostly like to focus on is the pros and cons from the perspective of the electricity consumer. So one, is rooftop solar even an option for you? And two, if it is it the right option for your situation? Now, Melly touched on some of this before, so I apologize for any repeat. As she said, 70% of households can't put solar on their roof. Many of them are renters, condo owners, townhouse owners that don't own the roof. And so for all those folks that just don't even have a roof to consider, before community solar, there was the only option really was wind source, or Xcel for a while had the Renewable Connect program, which is now full. But now they have a wonderful option outside of Xcel's, where with wind source, you're essentially helping Xcel pay to create that green energy that they're required to do by law anyway. So choices are good. But let's say that you do have a roof and you want to consider rooftop. So now the question is rooftop solar the right choice for your situation? I got on a lot of roofs and had to climb down off of a lot of roofs and tell the clients, I'm sorry, but your roof really, it doesn't make sense to put solar up there. One of the biggest reasons is shade. So even if you don't have a great big shade tree hanging over your roof, completely shading it all the time, you would be surprised how much the trees in your yard, particularly in spring, winter, fall, winter, spring, when the shadows are long, or early in the morning, late in the day, you'd be surprised how much shade on many roofs can impact the production of solar PV up there. And another thing to consider is, even if you don't have mature trees that are shading your roof now, are you in a newer neighborhood and you have some nice young trees that are soon going to grow into great big shade trees? So that when you finally reach to that return on investment time frame and you've paid off the upfront cost, will you then have shade covering the panels that you were looking for to get free green energy from? Another consideration is roof configuration. Particularly newer homes, I see, tend to be broken up into a lot of subroofs, a lot of dormer here, dormer there, dormer everywhere, which looks cool, but it is actually bad for heat gain and loss, and actually also happens to be bad for solar. So instead of putting one big old rectangle of PV on a south or southish facing roof, you might be left with the option of putting 2 or 3 panels on little trapezoids and triangles here or there, many of which are not going to be facing south. So you might have a few south, some east, some west, even north. So that not only increases your installation cost, all of those separate layouts, but it also decreases the efficiency of the system as a whole, because they are not all facing south optimally. Other considerations for cost are the pitch of the roof. The steeper the pitch, the longer the installation takes, the higher the cost, and the type of material. Concrete tile is more expensive to install on than asphalt shingle. Something else to consider is not a lot of people realize that it's common to not be able to offset all of your electricity use with your available roof space. I would frequently tell a client, well, we can offset 70% of what you use. And for whatever reason, they were like, oh, I don't want to do it at all then. I don't understand the logic of that, but there it is. And as a side note, actually, if you have a PV system that's producing only part of what you need, you can add a subscription to community solar to that, as long as you need a minimum amount. And so these two do play together, so that's cool. But let's say that, that you do own a roof and that it is suitable for solar. The next question comes down to the cost. So do you have anywhere between $10,000 to $30,000 after tax credits to install that system on your roof today? Or do you have the means and the desire to get a loan to do that? The answer to that question for a lot of folks is no. So again, if that's the case, yay, community solar, you've got another option, and you've got another option outside of wind source. Now let's say you back all of that upfront cost. So the way it works now is that your system is making energy and you are pushing into the grid that green energy and using it at night. And so you are offsetting, you're no longer paying Xcel for the cost of the electricity. You are still actually paying adjusters. You will never have zero bill from Xcel because they are also charging you to keep the grid up and all these other riders, but you are avoiding the cost of the electricity itself. And so over time, you are making that money back that you spent initially upfront to get the system on your roof. So the $1 million question is, how many years until you break even? So there's many factors to consider that you've got to throw into the bag. So there are a lot of variables and several big guesses. We've got the cost per watt of the install. Is it a simple, cheapest install, one rectangle on an asphalt shingle, not too steep south-facing roof? Or is it a partially shaded, broken up into a lot of subarrays, many of which are not facing south on a concrete tile, worst case scenario? So each of those have a very different outlook for return on investment time period because of the system cost up front. You're also looking at system efficiency, like I spoke of before. How many kilowatt hours per panel per year is your system gonna produce compared to that optimally oriented unshaded system? Another huge variable, and it's a guess, is the future cost of electricity. So that goes into the equation on when you're gonna break even. Next is interest on your loan. So you've got to figure that into the big picture equation on how fast you're going to make your money back. Other things are maintenance costs. So those inverters may go down before the useful life of the system is done, and you'll have to replace inverters. You also might run into the situation where you have to re-roof your house before the system is done. You are going to do a deinstall, reinstall of your system, and you're going to pay for that out of pocket, or you might be able to roll that into your homeowner's insurance. Finally, disposal costs. After that system is no longer really useful to you, and it's not a black and white thing. People talk about 20 or 25-year life of a system, but really they just degrade over time. They keep putting out energy, but it takes a while. And I've got a note. We can answer questions later, so I welcome those. They will decrease in their output over time, and it's kind of up to you to decide when it's not worth it anymore. All of those things are going into the black box for you to shake the box, massage the numbers, and spit out your return on investment time. And that number can be anywhere from 7 to 15 years, depending on how expensive your system was to install and how efficient it is and all those other variables. So now, let's say you've reached that time frame and it's paid for itself and you are pocketing that $50 to $100 of electricity costs that you don't have to pay to Xcel. And again, you're still paying those adjusters to them, so your bill's never zero. I'll throw one more monkey wrench into this, and that is, what if you have to sell your house before you've broken even? Can you add more to the cost of your house, your asking price? Maybe, maybe not. So I've been talking to realtors, and I learned lately that it is actually becoming difficult to sell houses with PV on them, particularly older systems. So there's that to consider. So with a rooftop system, you are putting all your eggs, many eggs, into one basket that you are carrying around for 20 years. And that is what you've decided is how you're going to go get renewable and keep it. So comparing that to community solar. With our annual plan, You can subscribe to our solar garden, and the average home is going to pay $3 to $4 a year to completely offset their fossil fuel electricity with green energy. That's it. No upfront costs, no additional costs, and no long-term commitment. That's a yearly agreement, and if you want out at the end of the year, you walk away. You're done. Off to the next thing, next best thing, if there is one. Even better, and Melly spoke of this a little bit regarding the bill credit. We believe that we can improve legislation over time such that our perennial plan, our long-term plan, may decrease in output and cost over time. So your initial out-of-pocket cost might be $3 or $4 a month, but that would go down over time. And eventually you would be saving money. And then ultimately, we hope we can get our legislation up to the level of states like Minnesota, where you're actually saving money at the get-go. So, as you can see, I'm a little biased, but in my opinion, I think that in many cases, it's financially advantageous to choose community solar. Not always. There are some houses out there that are perfect for solar, and your return on investment is going to be on the short side. And after that, you're going to get free energy. And that's great. And that's probably the best solution for you if you're staying in that house for the long haul. Also, having said all that, if anyone out there has solar on your roof or you work in the industry, I want to say thank you. Rooftop solar is definitely a crucial piece of our overall strategy to meet our renewable clean energy goals. And you are the pioneers of residential green energy. And I want to thank you for that. And I hope you've already hit your break-even point and now you're making free green energy. Now, I did come up with some other pros for rooftop solar I want to talk about. One of them is just that some people are techno geeks, particularly here in Boulder. I can relate, I'm an engineer. They like to have their own power plant on their roof. And they like to pull up that website and be able to look real time at what their panels are producing for them that day. And it is cool. It's really neat. And I get that. So that's a valid motivation. Another one is for folks who want to be able to go off-grid, independent of the grid if it goes down, particularly if you live in a place where it might go down frequently for long periods of time. So that's a reality in some places in this country, like California, with the fires. It's not so much here in Colorado yet, but wildfires are getting worse here. Populations are getting more dense here and pushing on our grid more. So, you know, it is going to become the day where it may be a real issue for folks around here. And even if it's not, if you have the money to spend, and I have to be clear, when I spoke about the cost of a PV system, that was strictly for a grid tie system. If you are talking about grid tie, battery backup, and the ancillary equipment in addition to the battery bank, you're talking about many more thousands of dollars you need to invest in order to have grid tie battery backup solar PV for your house. If you can afford it and you do not ever want to deal with having to go down, lose your power, more power to you. That's great. You should do that. Another reason is a little more esoteric, and that has to do with the concept of distributed generation. So I'm reading a book right now called The Grid. It's a fascinating read. If any of you like to geek out on all this like I do, I highly recommend the book. So the forward thinkers in this industry are talking about the day when we no longer have large power plants sending out energy to all of us little minions. Instead, we have the concept of distributed generation, where instead of those large power plants, we have lots and lots of little power plants and lots of batteries. And those little power plants will include rooftop solar, will include community gardens. I think they count. They will include wind turbines, hydro, small hydro, bio. They will also mean a lot of batteries in a lot of places and a much improved grid. So we're not there yet. We have work to do on the cost of batteries and the technology of batteries in general, and then bringing the cost of them down so that many people can have battery banks. And we also have a lot of work to do on improving our grid. It is actually very fragile, pieced together, marvelous thing that we've kept going for all these years. But when we can get all that going, and we can have all of these little power plants and so much redundancy in the system, we can have a super robust grid, and it's exciting to think about. And it is the future. And so folks that want to be a part of that on the very ground level, and again, I believe that, community solar counts as distributed generation as well, but rooftop solar is even more distributed, or more better, I guess. So I'd say that counts, and I just wanted to bring that up because I think it's really interesting. And so I'm sure there's other pros and cons, but I want to move on to the models of community solar now. So I mentioned the triangle of how money flows. Here in Colorado, where we put energy onto the grid, Xcel pays the customer with a bill credit, and then they pay SunShare. In some states, they move energy. So if, for example, a house that subscribed to Solar Garden used 700 kilowatt hours of energy off the grid that month, but their subscription provided 600 kilowatt hours onto the grid, then the energy provider would only charge that person for 100 kilowatt hours. So that's another model out there, not in our state. Another model is large national companies that trade RECs around. So they may have a customer that wants to buy into their program, and that customer can say, I am supporting green energy. I am using green energy from my home because I've got these RECs. But that large company may not be putting green energy onto the grid at all, or if they are, they might be putting it on in a whole nother state, nowhere near your local grid. So it's a model. It's very different than what we do. And the concept of renewable energy credits is big and complicated and beyond the scope of this discussion. Another variation is pure subscription versus purchase. So some community solar companies ask you to buy the panels on their array, however many panels you need to offset your energy. So you buy those panels for several $1,000s, and then over time, you're getting those bill credits from Xcel. And hopefully, over time, you are going to eventually make back all that upfront investment in bill credits, somewhat similar to rooftop solar in that regard. Some companies want you to pay a membership fee upfront, or they might call it something else, but some initial payout at the beginning. Some companies want you to sign an agreement for the full term, the full lifespan of the array until it is decommissioned, and that's typically 20, 25 years. And if you want to leave early, you're going to pay a very large exit fee to do so. Melly also spoke to this. Some companies prefer to cater just to large commercial companies or municipalities. They might reserve a small fraction of their array for residential, or they might not play residential at all. So those are some models. There's more out there. That's what I know about. But now I'd like to talk about SunShare's model, which is none of the above. So SunShare subscribes primarily to residential customers. As Melly said, our goal is to make renewable energy available to anyone who wants to play, who otherwise wouldn't be able to get in the game with renewable energy. And our goal is to keep it as simple and flexible as possible for the subscriber. So we don't have them buy panels, and there is no upfront cost to join. You're simply paying us to put green energy onto the grid on your behalf and at a very modest fee. And that cost is half a penny per kilowatt hour to go completely green and offset all of your fossil fuel electricity use with green energy. So for the average home, and in the solar industry, the average home is about a house that uses about 650 kilowatt hours a year, for 650 kilowatt hours a month, or 7,800 a year. So for that home, if you do the math, That's $3.25 a month or $39 a year to completely go green. Now this is the spot, because this is a little hard to wrap your mind around how it works. I was going to share my screen and show you what it looks like. So when you sign up with us, again, you don't pay anything. You just get on a wait list and we process you through the Solar Garden program. And then when your array goes live, you're going to start seeing 2 bills instead of 1. So does everybody see the 2 bills, the Excel bill on the right and the SunShare bill on the left?
We can see you.
Awesome. So Excel bill on the right, that's just your electricity portion of your bill. So your bill is going to look just the same as it did before at the top. You're going to see the cost for the electricity plus all of the adjusters, taxes, and the grand total. So this actual example represents a small, very efficient house or an apartment or condo. So this person, if they were not subscribed to Solar Gardens, would pay Excel 45 bucks and change for their electricity that month. Once you're subscribed to SunShare though, you're going to see that bill credit off your bill every month. And it's going to be for the amount of energy that your panels on our array made that month. I say yours, they don't even belong to you, but we look at how much energy you used over the course of the last year to determine how many panels on our array we need to dedicate to your needs, so that the amount of energy you pull in from the grid over the course of the year is the amount of green energy we're pushing onto the grid over the course of the year. And our panels are going to produce a varying amount, summer versus winter. But what we're always looking at is how much energy those panels made that month. And then you look at Excel's bill credit rate. Right now, it's about 7 cents a kilowatt hour. Multiply those two together, and you get the amount of money off of your Excel bill that month. So this person, instead of paying 45 and change to Excel, is now going to pay $19.21 to Excel. And then they're going to pay SunShare for that amount of energy their panels made. And they're going to pay it at a rate that is half a penny more. So 7.5 cents per kilowatt hour. So they're going to pay SunShare $28. So $26 off their Excel bill, $28 paid out to SunShare. And the out-of-pocket for this person was $1.87 that month. So if they'd have done nothing, they would have paid Excel $45. Now they're paying a total of $47 if you add up Excel bill and SunShare bill. So this person pays less than $25 a year to go completely green. Now again, that's a smaller place. I was talking about an average house being about 650 kilowatt hours a year. So that's about twice that. And again, that's how we come up with that $3 to $4 a month. So we also like to keep it really flexible. If you move out of Excel territory, then, or for any reason you're no longer an Excel subscriber, you don't have an Excel bill, then your agreement dissolves entirely. No obligation. If you move within Excel territory, you get to take your subscription with you. That's what's really neat about this for renters. So even if you hop around a lot, you can just bring this with you. You can adjust your subscription size as you need. If you get an electric car, you can increase your subscription. Hot tub, increase your subscription. If you move into a more efficient house, you can decrease your subscription. So it moves with you and its size can change for you. Now, with our annual plan, if you no longer want to subscribe, you just let us know before the end of the year and we're done. You walk away. You found something better you'd like to do. And ideally, in the perfect scenario with our perennial plan, your expenses are going to go down over time. And so it becomes a commodity over time, and you have less and less incentive to ever not want to do this because it gets less and less expensive. So I think I'm gone a little bit over, and I've only got one more quick thing to say. We do have a perennial plan that's more complicated, and I'd be happy to explain it to anyone who wants to talk about that later, but I do want to leave time for questions and answers. So I just have one more little bit, and that's it. That's this. Y'all are all our sustainable community. And as such, you're really the frontline warriors in the fight against climate change. And so I have 3 asks of you to help us. The first one is this. If any of y'all out there are an Excel subscriber and you are not offsetting your fossil fuel electricity use with green energy in some way right now, I encourage you, nay, I challenge you, to put your name in the chat and your phone number to me privately and let me call you back later and get you subscribed. Because number 2, I would love for you to share this with your customers. Those are the people that care, and those are the people that we need to get the word to. Folks that want to do the right thing and want to get on the renewable energy bandwagon but cannot put solar on their own roofs or don't want to. You have those megaphones to the people we're looking for. And so if you subscribe and you suggest to your client that they could do the same, they'll be like, well, are you doing it? You say, you bet I am. How powerful is that? Because that's the thing. We need to get the snowball rolling, and we need to make community solar as commonplace as recycling is, right? A no-brainer. And you can help us do that. Also, just a little incentive for you. We have a $100 referral forward and backward. So if you have a friend or a client that you tell about SunShare to and they end up subscribing, you get a $100 gift card to a local vendor, and so do they. We make our gift cards to local vendors so that we can keep our marketing money in the community and help out local vendors who could really need it right now. And our third ask is this. If you find yourself in a position where you have influence over policy, legislation, regulation, and I know that some of you do sometimes in Boulder, at least in the city of Boulder, consider how you could present to make a case for community solar, to make it more accessible, to make it count for more, for points and so forth. And yeah, just to make it be a bigger part of the whole strategy that we're going to have to employ in order to meet our renewable energy goals, both for the state and for the city in the next few years. So I'm really excited to see this take off, and I hope that you are too. And now, I apologize if I went a little bit over, but I'd love to open it up for discussion and questions. So thank you guys for your time.
Julie, thank you so much. That was so wonderful. I'm going to pull a couple people up here so that you are not all by yourself.
Okay, great.
I know that we've gotten some questions. I'm super excited to ask those questions and have a discussion about them. This is funny. I don't know how to make myself big, but that's all right. So first of all, I just want to say I really appreciate both of you and your time and your broad perspective that you've been able to bring to CGBG about renewable energy kind of holistically, but as well as we whittle down solar into a smaller category and rooftop in residential solar into a smaller category, because I think a lot of us have a lot at stake and have these conversations all the time. I'm an architect. I talk about solar with every client I have, and it's always hard, you know, and sometimes it gets phased or it gets VE'd, and that's okay. But this is a flexible option. This is something in the arsenal of homeowners and designers and builders that they can say, hey, it's okay. You don't have to feel bad. Like you had your heart set on this rooftop solar system that you've been thinking is the right thing, your way to participate in creating renewable energy. There's this other thing that's a completely different model that we can do first. So first question, how is the site SunShare chosen? How are your sites chosen for your arrays? what are the best kinds of sites? Are large commercial rooftops an option? So yeah.
You want me to answer that, Julie? Yeah. Okay. So it really depends. Excel has some requirements about where we have to connect to their grid. So they have specific geographies that they request that we target, many of which are in, you know, sort of the farmland, you know, a more rural area where essentially where there's not as much electricity usage. So they have more capacity for us to be putting that electricity back onto their grid. So, you know, there are a variety of factors that we have. The ground has to be relatively flat. You know, our panels, they're on trackers. So they actually follow the sun, you know, rising in the east and setting in the west. So we just have to make sure that they are, you know, able to follow that sun, and, you know, they're not shaded at any point during the day. So we have to have enough room to space them out. But really it's, you know, we kind of look for land where it will be better with SunShare than without SunShare, right? So the most recent array that we are just brought online used to be farmland. It was dry land farming, so it wasn't irrigated. So the farmer, you know, essentially couldn't make any money off of crops. So we were able to, you know, give him a lease for 30 years that now he's got that stable income. The ground is, you know, refertilizing, and, you know, hopefully he'll be able to start using it again in the future. We haven't yet done any commercial rooftops. They are typically much smaller system sizes than what we build, but we're kind of always in conversations about it. I'm sure it will be happening in the near future, but we haven't as yet done that.
Awesome. That's really interesting. And Julie had told me about your most recent array in one of our previous conversations. And that's just, it's a mutually benefiting situation when you find property owners like that.
Totally.
And I think, Julie, you mentioned that he was worried about keeping the property within the family, and this allowed him that stability.
Exactly. And we have honeybees at some of our gardens, you know, so we plant pollinators, native seeds and grasses. So there are a lot of ways that we are, you know, sort of trying to make that particular ground even under the solar gardens better. But, you know, even without, you know, any sort of agricultural component to it, you know, the idea is to, you know, bring someone something that they couldn't get before, both for the person who owns the land where we built the garden and, you know, the subscribers who are participating.
Another thing I learned.
Yeah, that's awesome. I hadn't thought about.
Oh,
go ahead, Julie.
Another thing I learned that I thought was neat is that, you know, when you're up in the air in a plane looking at the farmland and there's big circles, because that's how their irrigation works. So they get all those little corners. They don't do anything. And so we can put solar arrays in those little corners and they can maximize their land use that way. That's kind of neat.
Yeah.
I understand.
That is neat. And it's interesting that you become stewards of the land also. So taking that seriously and bringing in positive habitats at the locations of your solar arrays is really exciting. I want to pause really quickly.
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. You cut off. What were you going to say, Julie?
Oh, I understand that we've also had some opportunities in the past to utilize brownfields. Places where you can't build anything on that anyway, but you can put pylons in and put arrays up. So that's nice use too.
Yeah, that's amazing. I want to pause really quickly. We do a raffle during our brown bag events to thank our organization and people who are here, whether they're members or not, and to support our restaurants here in Boulder, which are struggling. So this event, we're doing $50 to Mojo Taqueria, which is one of my favorite places. When I first moved to Boulder, I lived like 15 feet from Mojo, so I'm always happy to support them. And they are just 2 locations here in Boulder and in Lyons, I think. And our winner is Steve Hodge, who happened to be the first person to show up for today's event. So Steve, you rock. Thank you for being here. We will reach out to you via email and get you set up with a gift card to Mojo. I hope you like Mexican food because it's delicious. Okay. Also, just generally, folks, feel free to send in questions in the chat. Jesse, the other half of our events committee, is filtering and sending them to me so that they are in some sort of logical order. So we will get to your question. It just might not come in the order you expect it to. So let's see. Where did we go? Okay, so if there is excess solar on a site, where does it go? Does it go into the grid or does it offset fossil fuel usage? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, so it goes, so 100% of the energy that the solar garden produces goes onto the grid. SunShare has never had unsubscribed energy. We make it a point to have our gardens fully subscribed before they ever go online. But if we did have unsubscribed energy, is what it's called, that would go onto the grid. Excel basically just pays SunShare a nominal fee of like 1 penny per kilowatt hour for that energy. So it's still, once our garden is built, it will always produce the same amount, based on the sun, it will produce the same amount of energy. It will always go onto the grid, regardless of whether it's subscribed or not.
Cool. And Melly, you spoke about this in the beginning a little bit, and maybe we can just touch on it again. You talked about how before 2019, the amount of community solar capacity that Excel allowed to be added each year was limited. Can you talk again, just to recap, how in 2019 the Modernization Act opened up the early allocation and how that happened?
Yeah. So, okay. So there are actually 2 components to this. So Excel has every year what's called its Renewable Energy Standard Plan, which it has to get approved by the Public Utilities Commission. And that's their way of, basically, we know as a state that we have a target of being carbon neutral by 2040. So, how is Excel, the largest utility in Colorado, going to ensure that that happens? So even before Governor Polis was elected, there were those requirements. Again, that legislation in 2010 mandated that some amount of, community solar was allowed each year. So it was basically a negotiation, right? That happened at the, between Excel and the Public Utilities Commission, with input from the industry, from our customers, from everyone, to try every year to demonstrate that there is demand for this. So the 2019 legislation changed the size, the allowable size of a community solar garden. It increased from 2 megawatts to 5 megawatts. It did not actually mandate that the program itself, it's called the Solar Rewards Community Program through Excel, increased. But because there was so much support behind that legislation, we actually had many of our customers and other community solar developers' customers testify at the Public Utilities Commission, at the Senate hearings regarding, the legislation. And because of that, it was clear that there was demand for this. And so the PUC required that Excel double the size of the program. So for the 3 years, 2020, 21, and 22, it's actually mandated that it's 75 megawatts of community solar instead of the 30, 35 that they had been doing per year prior to that. So it wasn't technically the legislation, but it was a result of the legislation and the, sort of activism behind that legislation.
So, and we don't have to go too far into this, but what this highlights is that Excel has to be held to allowing for more renewable energy infrastructure, which doesn't make any sense to me. Why wouldn't they want a more robust renewable energy grid that they don't even have to do anything to have access to?
That is a very good question, and I look forward to
I
your
know.
testimony at the next hearing.
You got it. I'll be
Yeah,
there.
no, I mean, that truly, like, we pay to upgrade their grid to allow solar to be put onto it. This is
Clean
going
energy.
to have to happen anyway. Like, we are making their grid better. We are making their grid stronger. You know, distributed generation is proven, you know, by leaps and bounds to improve the stability of the grids. We're putting these gardens, I said, like, in the places that they want us to, so that they are, you know, getting the electricity onto the grid in the places they want, where they need it the most. So yeah, it's beneficial to them, but they have to, you know, it's energy that they're not getting to produce. So it's money out of their
And they have other
pocket.
stakeholders.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's,
Yeah.
yes, we call ourselves frenemies because that is the least offensive thing we can call each other.
Makes sense. We'll dodge the rest of that landmine for now.
Yes.
Anybody, usually once we stop recording, we have everybody's welcome to stay on, by the way, and you can turn your cameras on and chat with us when this is over, but we can go back to that then if you all want.
Right.
But okay, question 4. I'm being focused here. Has SunShare thought of incorporating solar with architecture, possibly creating shade in public spaces, parks, pavilions, that sort of thing? Maybe this goes back to that economy of scale issue.
Yeah. So we have, that's another, so we actually, David, our founder, is friends with someone who invented like a mobile solar charging station that can be used for electric vehicles, like little USB chargers. You know, it basically looks like a bus stop, but it has solar panels on the top. So it's, you know, mobile is a term used loosely. But yeah, so that's one of the things that we've talked about. We do have some municipal customers, the City of Westminster, City of Arvada, Highlands Ranch Community Association. So we've actually talked about, you know, sort of starting to incorporate that type of thing into their, you know, into their cities. So, you know, bringing these mobile charging stations, kind of testing different use cases for it. You know, in order to kind of build a path forward to a more robust program like you're talking about, you know, carports and, you know, kind of all of those things, like the architecture, buildings, all of those things. So, you know, it's something that we're, again, like kind of constantly evaluating, but have not yet executed. It's just one of the, you know, kind of many things on our roadmap. Of, you know, figuring out how to balance our own, you know, resources, our very kind of limited resources. Like, we're a 15-person company, so we can't do everything.
I think that's something. Well, and I think that's a really good point, is that, you know, you have this beautiful website and great graphics. Well done to your marketing team. And
that's also me.
I think it's really well done. Really important to remember that, like, you started as this tiny company that did almost nothing on fumes for however long it took to gain momentum. And here you are, still a small company trying to impact legislation, trying to do things for, I'm a renter, and, you know, like, that's awesome. All right. We'll ask the questions that people are asking and not mine. Let's see. All right. In SunShare's model, so this is something Julie and I talked about a lot as well. And there's a couple questions I got privately, Jesse, I'll have to feather in here. But in SunShare's model, will subscription costs decrease over time as the cost of solar garden development is paid off?
Julie, do you want to answer
that? And I think, Julie, I think the gap of how your perennial plan works is not something you got into in too much detail, so you might be able to speak to that a little bit. And I have a second part to this question, which will be perfect.
Can you repeat the question?
Sorry, Julie. Yeah. So in SunShare's model, will the subscription cost decrease over time as the amortized cost of solar garden development is paid off?
Okay. The idea is not that it's going to change over time because we're paying off the array. The idea is more that it may decrease over time if Excel's bill credit rate increases, which we right now don't have control over. It is a black box, and they are playing shenanigans with the bill credit rate, and they are in court for that right now. So yeah, we don't really know the magic calculation that they're using every year to come up with this bill credit rate. But what we want to see is that it would track electricity costs. And so ideally in the future, you're going to see that bill credit rate increase more rapidly than, so in our perennial plan, SunShare's charge to you goes up 1.5% a year. That's fixed for the life of the 20-year agreement. Ideally, the bill credit rate is going to go up 2% a year or more. Excel's electricity costs have been going up 2% a year. So if we can win legislation to say that we want that bill credit to track with electricity costs, and that makes common sense, then that means when you start out paying $3 to $4 a month, a few years out, you might be paying $1.50 a month. And then maybe 10 years out, you are paying the same to SunShare as the bill credit rate is. After that, you are making money on the deal. So that is the driver behind the current model of why your costs hopefully would go down over time, assuming that we do get this legislation into place. I hope that answered the question.
I think so. And I want to go ahead, Melina.
Oh, no, go ahead.
I was just going to say, so this was something Julie and I went back and forth on a lot when we first started talking about doing this event. And it took me a minute to kind of wrap my mind around the 1.5% versus 2% and all the variables and like predictability or unpredictability of that. And I think for me individually, the mind shift was from like, I've been taught rooftop solar will make me money someday, which maybe is true, maybe is not true, depending on whatever set of conditions. The question that I realized I should be asking is like, is $4 a month or whatever, am I willing to pay any amount of money to swap out one type of energy for another based on my values? Or because I think it makes sense, not even just because I'm a good person that likes sustainability or, whatever, but because X, Y, and Z makes sense for renewable energy, whether or not you care about the planet, So one of the questions I got during your presentation that I want to pose to you both is that it appears community solar relies on altruism, which I'm guilty of. Is there a future that you see where you end up paying less overall for community solar to make it more economically beneficial for those not interested in green initiatives?
So yeah, so I think that this is something that we battle with on a regular basis. So in Minnesota, the bill credit that our subscribers get is it's almost 16 cents. In Colorado, the bill credit that our subscribers get is around 7 cents. So that is, we have to cover our costs of building and operating the solar garden within that, that revenue that we're earning on the subscription that we're selling. So in Minnesota, the legislation is so good that we're actually able to offer our subscribers a discount up front because, we can still make money, like the tiny amount of margin that we make within that 15 cents. But within the 7 cents, we can't, we literally cannot afford to build the garden and maintain it for 20 years plus within the 7 cent bill credit that subscribers are getting, and commercial customers get an even lower one than that. So that's why in Colorado we charge that half a penny per kilowatt hour, so that we know what our revenue is going to be over time. As Julie said, we don't know for sure what that bill credit is going to look like in the future. We're fighting that every day, and we're working on legislation. We're working with the PUC to try to get that to be predicted. We actually did accomplish that in Minnesota, where the bill credit is predicted for the entire life of the garden. So hopefully we will have that same success in Colorado. In terms of altruism is one reason, that you would pay $3 to $4 a month. I think another reason, though, is simply choice, where this is, again, like the only way that you can participate in who produces your electricity, that you have that choice of who produces your electricity. And that you have the choice of how much renewable energy is created. Otherwise, that's all dictated by Excel. And so this is where, kind of that choice, our Karina Cumbie, our legislative lead, she was talking about most of our bills have been bipartisan. So it's not like this is just something for, the left wing of the world. This is creating, an environment where Excel doesn't get to dictate every single thing about how energy is produced and what type of energy is produced. And that is a talking point that is not just for Democrats. So
Right.
Right. So like, even if like you may be willing to pay $3 a month just to ensure that Excel is not a monopoly any longer. Right. So like that piece,
Mm-hmm.
I think there are several components to it that go beyond just the altruism, although, that's obviously our hook, like renewable energy. That's what we're here for. So
I would like to add one thing to that, and maybe I misunderstood the question. But if the implication is that rooftop solar is a moneymaker and community solar is altruism, I would like to toss a thought out to you there, and it has to do with the time value of money. If you were to take that $20,000 you have lying around and use it to put PV on your roof, maybe instead you put that in your mutual fund or your bonds or whatever favorite form of investment that you have, and you sit on that for 20 years versus community
Right.
solar $3 or $4 a month right now, knowing that the legislation is probably going to improve and that's going to go down over time. Now, you're still contributing to green energy as much as you would have with rooftop solar, but if you fast forward 20 years and look at that investment you left alone for 20 years of $20,000, now who's coming ahead financially?
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah,
a lot
that's
of
great.
that, Jessica, you brought this up, but is people have been trained, consumers in general have been trained that they should be able to save money on everything, right? Like everything is about what's on sale, like what's the discount, what is the benefit to me? And the fact is this is a commodity, and so it does cost money, and you're paying for the value of what you're getting, which is not having to put something on your system. You're paying for that flexibility. You're paying for a number of other benefits that go beyond just the, like, I'm a good person and doing something good for the earth, I think.
Right. Yeah. I think it's interesting too to think about, I think what's, we're talking about like what happens this year, what happens in the next 5 years in Colorado legislation, but what happens 25 years from now in your mind? Like, what does this look like? Have we completely dismantled Excel's need to burn coal? Or like, I don't actually know the answer to that. And you've spent much more time envisioning like these potential scenarios. So what do you see?
I mean, if you ask David, he will tell you that will happen in 10 years, not in 25 years. I think that, so Excel put out, their goal of being 100% carbon neutral in, I think, 2040. And this is, kind of us saying, okay, put your money where your mouth is, like actually make this happen. I mean, we all saw what happened in Texas, with the storm, and the utility grid is something that literally we need to save lives. And there is research that demonstrates the benefit of distributed generation on that electricity grid. So whether it's coal or solar, like it needs to come from a variety of sources, and it needs to have backups, right? Redundancy. And so that is what these solar gardens are doing, is building little power plants all over the state, you know, where we're not reliant on this one mine or the one, you know, nuclear site that, you know, may or may not have problems. So, you know,
That can fail, right?
Exactly. Like it goes beyond just that, you know, kind of what type of energy is it, and into what does the grid look like? You know, we live in a country where the infrastructure was built around this fossil fuel, you know, bet. And now all utilities are trying to figure out, what do we do next? How do we make sure that we're not, when we run out of this one type of energy, we still have a way to keep people's lights on? And distributed generation is the answer to that, I think, in a lot of cases, regardless, again, of whether that's solar or, you know, another type of electricity that has crypto and energy or whatever that has yet to be invented.
Right. Well, and I think that's really important, is that solar is a small piece of renewable energy and a small piece of our energy grid. You know, we have hydro, we have wind, we have coal, we have, you know, all the fossil fuels, and they're all important, and they all play a role in the past and in the future. And so here's community solar, which is like this, I don't know, small, tiny wedge in this big picture that's kind of growing.
Right. Well, and that, like, yeah, that's what we see.
And it's not that you don't have any embodied energy.
Right. I think that the pie chart is probably, I mean, I think that coal may, in fact, just completely go away. But I think that the pie chart is going to, on the whole, have the same sources. They're just going to shift, like dial up and down which sources are most popular at any given point in time. You know, the ones that you listed. So it's really, you know, again, it's just about kind of how are we growing that slice of the pie that is solar, and what is that replacing? You know, there are some obvious answers and some that are not as obvious, you know, but that are moving in generally in the direction, not just of renewable energy, but of that, you know, sort of grid stability and the, you know, kind of a new, like the grid of the 21st century, they've been calling it. So, you know, just kind of what is that next evolution technologically, infrastructure, you know, and the sources and uses of that energy.
Yeah. Well, and we take for granted how I haven't been in Colorado that long, but I already take for granted how much sun we get here, and how solar makes so much sense in Colorado year round.
Yeah.
And it doesn't everywhere. And that's why it's important that we have all of these diverse technologies that are emerging and answers to energy needs that we will continue to have forever. Exactly. We're not going to like make up technology that means we don't need energy anymore. At least not not in my lifetime, I don't think. That we know of. Yeah. But the iPhone, you know, who knew? Okay, I have one more question that came in. Development capital for many solar gardens comes from large tax equity investors who get a buyout after a few years when their tax credits have been exhausted. Is that how SunShare is operating as well?
So we do find tax equity okay, so this is actually one of the biggest differentiators of SunShare. We do not sell the gardens after we build them. So many community solar developers build the gardens, they take that tax equity credit, and then they sell the gardens off to, you know, a large utility or a large conglomerate, some aggregator of like community solar assets. SunShare, we find our own tax equity partner, so we do not make enough money to have a big enough tax burden that we can actually write off, you know, the 30% of the 26% that, you know, the benefit we get of that tax credit. So we find a tax equity partner. They essentially get the benefit of that tax equity for 6 years. SunShare is, though, the long-term owner and operator of that solar garden. We subscribe the gardens ourselves. We build the gardens ourselves. I mean, we have, obviously construction partners, but we've managed the builders of the gardens ourselves. We manage the subscribers for their entire lifetime. We manage the operations and maintenance of the garden for its entire lifetime. And that is a huge differentiator of SunShare from other community solar developers, where that we will have that relationship. It's in our best interest to make our subscribers happy, make that garden produce as much energy as humanly possible, like keep it running forever, use the best technology, make the land the best that it can be. That like true community partnership is in our best interest, because we are going to be here and be part of that community for 20-25 years.
That's awesome. Okay, I think we have wrapped up. We've used all our time. Julie, I'm going to send everybody your email address in the chat, if that's okay.
That's great.
All right. I want to thank you both again for joining us. We're going to wrap up and we'll stop the recording, and we'll let people jump on if they'd like to.
Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Also, I wanted to let people know that the phone number on our directory page goes to me, and that email redirects to me. So if you have any follow-up, if you have a group of people you'd like me to give a Zoom presentation to, or if you want to step up and get a subscription yourself, you don't have to remember anything, but you just have to go to the directory, the SunShare page on the CGBG site. So, and
we'll post this whole recording in the next week sometime, so it'll be there for everybody to come back and look at.
Thank you so much.
Share with your friends.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you both. This was great.
Thank you guys for having us. Yeah.
Appreciate it.